Glaring double standards emerge on the global stage as Spain rises to defend her own borders. Is Israel to blame for the new migrant crisis in Europe, plus an astounding new medical development? And is the return of the Jewish people to their ancestral homeland the fulfillment of biblical prophecy, or merely a misguided political venture? Stay tuned for all this and more in this week's edition of Israel Matters. I'm your host, Stephen Briggs. I'm sure by now you've seen the footage of floods of migrants overwhelming the border of Spain at Ceuta. In Spanish, it's pronounced, in European Spanish, it's pronounced Ceuta. It's a TH at the end there, at the front there. But Ceuta is how it's been portrayed in the media. And they overwhelmed the border, especially on the 29th and the 30th of July. Spanish officials have reported about 75 deaths connected to the mass crossing from Morocco into Ceuta. Most victims drowned, while others were crushed near the breakwater and border fence. Authorities say approximately 72,000 people entered Ceuta during the wider surge, although earlier Spanish reporting placed the principal one-day crossing at more than 50,000. Roughly 70,000 reportedly returned to Morocco, many voluntarily, leaving perhaps a few thousand still in or around Ceuta. More than 1,000 people received medical treatment. The surge appears to have been encouraged partly by viral social media claims that the border was open or that reaching Ceuta would lead to legal status in Spain. Spanish and EU officials also blame smugglers and trafficking networks, although individual migrants told reporters that many travelled independently after seeing online posts. So, friends, what is being done? Spanish soldiers, civil guard officers and police have been reinforced in Ceuta. Migrants have been escorted, registered or returned through cooperation with Morocco, and onward travel from Ceuta to mainland Spain is being restricted through identity checks at ports and airports. The Spanish military has distributed water, and more than 1,000 people have been treated by health services. Some migrants have attempted to enter Ceuta's temporary migrant centre, known as the SETI. However, reporting indicates that many people initially had little or no reliable food or shelter, with some sleeping on beaches and using public showers. Refugee assistance organisations are calling for dignified accommodation and proper individual processing, including access to asylum procedures for those who qualify. Spain has also installed a 500-metre floating maritime barrier near the Tarajal breakwater, supported by anchored buoys or buoys, depending on where you're from, and civil guard patrol vessels. Police and military deployments are expected to remain reinforced. At the EU level, interior ministers held an emergency meeting and discussed stronger action against smuggling networks, closer intelligence sharing, monitoring social media for warning signs, strengthening external borders, improving returns, and increasing cooperation with Morocco and other non-EU countries. Much of this response is focused on preventing another influx rather than directly meeting the humanitarian needs of people presently stranded in Ceuta. But what does this all have to do with Israel Matters, as the title of the show says, and why is that important for us to be aware of? Well, All Israel News reports that days after tens of thousands of mostly young men stormed the Spanish enclave of Ceuta from Morocco, certain corners of the internet have claimed that Israel was behind the incident. However, a more serious analysis of the situation points to Islamist groups in Morocco, traffickers, and an online campaign having contributed to the situation, according to Zineb Ribua, a research fellow with the Hudson Institute. Speaking on Israel's Radio 103 FM on Sunday, Reichman University lecturer Henrik Sinnemann explained the origin of the Israeli-linked conspiracy theories regarding Ceuta. Israel enters the picture indirectly because of our alliance with Morocco and with the Americans, he said. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has become the leading anti-Israel voice in Europe. Some people say this is an attempt by the King of Morocco to show Sanchez what could happen if he compromises on other issues, for example, in his relationship with Morocco's biggest rival, Algeria, he continued. He's due to visit there, that's Algeria, soon, and Spain also buys large quantities of Algerian gas. About 40% of Spain's gas comes from there, Sinnemann explained. The theories accusing Israel have largely come from the usual suspects who have blamed Israel for every negative occurrence for the past 3 years, fueling anti-Semitism by exploiting their massive online reach to disseminate their unsubstantiated claims. A leading light of this group, the far-right conspiracy theorist Candace Owens, claimed that Morocco's flag used to be a Star of David, which is actually a true thing. It was originally, prior to 1915, the Star of Day, which she informed the public is an occult Baal symbol. Spain stays strong. The world knows what is happening and exactly who is behind it, Candace wrote on X. Responding to an earlier post by news influencer Mario Nolfol, who mused about it, how it was interesting that people are claiming the Moroccan government is openly cooperating with Israel and it could have something to do with Ceuta. Not long after Spain refused to accept ships carrying weapons ultimately destined for Israel, these ships were reportedly accepted instead by Morocco. Now that the Red Sea is closed to Israeli ships thanks to the Houthis, who's controlling the Strait of Gibraltar? The entrance to the Mediterranean becomes more critical, he wrote. Owens also reposted a 7-year-old post by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's son Yair, which has become a touchstone of many of the theories blaming Israel for the crisis. In the post, he sarcastically offered that Israel stop funding NGOs calling for the Spanish enclaves Ceuta and Melilla to be given to Morocco if Spain stops funding NGOs in our country that call us to give away Judea and Samaria. Other members of the informal group of anti-Israel activists on the American political right, sometimes dubbed the woke right or woke Reich, is also piled in. Former Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene blamed the Uni Party, which according to conspiracy theorists is the unified bloc of elites running the US, with Israel, in brackets or the Jews, often being seen as the ultimate puppet master directing it. Without making that part explicit, Greene claimed that the Republicans paid $40 million of your tax dollars to Morocco to invade Spain, echoing the insinuation made by the Republican Thomas Massie, who wrote on X that 2 weeks before migrants from Morocco invaded Ceuta, the GOP passed a bill with $40 million for Morocco and a committee report advising Spanish-administered cities of Ceuta and Melilla are located in Moroccan territory and remain the subject of Morocco's long-standing claim. Conspiracy czar Alex Jones shared a theory saying that Israel launched an Islamic invasion of Spain, while also writing that people who are in denial about the fact that the Trump administration gave the green light for the Moroccan Islamic invasion of Spanish territory are living in fantasyland. On the other side of the political horseshoe, far-left figures were not ashamed to raise similar accusations. Hassan Piker, a radical left-wing activist who has praised Hezbollah in the past and recently surged in popularity, asserted Israel and America got the Moroccan government to send like 40,000 people into Spanish-administered territory. Piker also falsely claimed that Israeli envoys posted about it, presumably referring to comments made by Israel's UN ambassador Danny Danon. Former Human Rights Watch director Kenneth Roth also speculated that Israel might be behind the incident, arguing that if Iran can control the Strait of Hormuz, Spain could easily control the Strait of Gibraltar and potentially block Israeli access to the Atlantic. However, more sober analysts of the events have also pointed out that the massive sudden wave of migrants suggested some kind of prior coordination. According to the New York Times, migrants who were already near the border rushed towards the city of Ceuta after social media posts encouraged people to do so, though the report also noted that some police officers reportedly urged the migrants to cross the border. Reboua herself, being from Morocco, wrote on X that the country's interior ministry has officially confirmed the existence of an online campaign encouraging people to attempt to reach Ceuta. According to the ministry, the campaign falsely claimed that the border was open, that anyone who reached Ceuta would be allowed to remain, that those who swam across would face no legal consequences, and that entry was easy. And by swim across, of course, is not literally across the Mediterranean. It's around an enclave that takes them into Ceuta. A report by the Spanish newspaper El País also confirmed that bots and accounts on Instagram, TikTok, and other platforms echoed the message that the border is open, with Reboua noting that this coincided, maybe not coincidentally, with Throne Day, when Moroccan forces are already busy with the king's ceremony. She also explained that Islamist groups could be seeking to destabilize the country through a push against the Moroccan government's relatively pro-Western policies. Morocco just signed numerous partnerships with the US. Morocco just launched a pipeline that will help Spain get rid of Russian gas, is negotiating a peace deal with Algeria, and is finally solving the Western Sahara issue. Morocco also doesn't benefit from this since the country is already under pressure with Sahel migration, she wrote. Writing on her Substack blog, Reboua emphasized that for a long time, Islamist rhetoric in Morocco has painted Europe as a kind of promised land, a place where welfare never runs out, chances are everywhere, and prosperity comes easily, with barely any effort required. The objective has always been to weaken trust in Morocco's own institutions and steer young people toward leaving. In response to these glaring double standards, Hanania Naftali put out a somewhat satirical video about what it would look like if other nations put the same standards on Spain that Spain puts on Israel, reminiscent of Matthew 7 verse 1 and 2, which says, "Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." Let's watch this video now entitled, "I support the two-state solution in Spain."
I support the two-state solution in Spain. A sovereign state for Spain and a sovereign state for the peaceful immigrants who entered their land. I also call for an immediate ceasefire between the Spanish forces and the peaceful immigrants. Spain should resolve the conflict peacefully without any harm to civilians. Over the last few days, tens of thousands of peaceful immigrants crossed the border from Morocco into the Spanish territory of Ceuta. And how did Spain respond? By declaring a state of emergency, by deploying their military, by using force. At least 18 people died. 18! This is a disproportionate response. Spain must show restraint. You see, Spain controlled parts of Morocco and Africa for centuries. They colonized it. Ceuta and Melilla are literally Spanish colonial territories on African soil. So the immigrants who breached the borders, they're not invaders. They simply expressed their frustration. I read that their therapist recommended it. It's very good for anger management to just tear down a fence and walk into the country that colonized your ancestors. It's healing. Madrid should be a divided capital. It's only fair. An East Madrid for the immigrants and a West Madrid for the Spanish. Or maybe just one single state for all people from the Pyrenees to the sea. Spain has no right to exist in its current form. It should be dismantled. If you actually think this through, Spain is an apartheid state. It gives rights to the Spanish citizens, but not to the tens of thousands of immigrants who just arrived yesterday. Why don't they have the same voting rights? This is apartheid. And don't get me started on the border fence. Spain is reinforcing the border fence. A fence. It's an apartheid wall. Walls don't work, Spain. Walls only divide us. Why are you building walls to keep out the indigenous Africans from African soil that you literally colonized? And these immigrants, they are not illegal border crossers. They are freedom fighters. They are resistance, actually. They have a right to breach the border because Spain colonized the Americas, killed millions of indigenous people, and colonized Africa. This is just decolonization in action. Therefore, I am calling for an immediate BDS campaign against Spain. Boycott, divestment, and sanctions. Do not buy Spanish olive oil. Do not buy Spanish products. Cancel your vacations to Ibiza and Barcelona. We cannot normalize relations with an apartheid colonial occupying regime that uses military force against unarmed immigrants. The UN must convene an emergency session immediately. I expect the ICC to issue arrest warrants for the Spanish leadership immediately. Pedro Sanchez is a war criminal. And to the Spanish settlers living in Ceuta and Melilla, it's time you pack your bags. Go back to Europe, where you came from. You are settlers on stolen African land. From the strait to the sea, Morocco will be free. Ceuta will be free. Did it sound insane? Listen, for years, Spain has been one of the loudest, most arrogant voices in Europe lecturing Israel. They recognized a Palestinian state right after October 7th, basically rewarding terrorism. They constantly demand Israel stop using force and have ceasefire and not harm civilians when Israel is fighting a genocidal terrorist organization that literally wants to wipe us off the map. And yet, the second Spain's own border is breached, not by terrorist army firing rockets and taking hostages, but by unarmed migrants. What do? They declare a state of emergency. They deploy the actual military. People die. The Prime Minister calls it an attack on Spain's territorial integrity. When Israel defends its borders against armed Hamas, Spain calls it a war crime. When Spain defends its borders against unarmed migrants in a colonial enclave in Africa, they call it defending territorial integrity. It's a joke. So to the government of Spain, before you lecture Israel on how to defend its borders, maybe look in the mirror. Because right now, you are doing exactly what you condemn us for. Except you're doing it to the people who are not even shooting at you. I'm Hanania. If you enjoyed this video, share it with someone who needs a reality check on European hypocrisy. I'm going to see you in the next one.
Should Spain accept every migrant that breaches its borders? No, I believe Spain should defend her borders, and Israel should defend her borders. Each nation should maintain borders with orderly avenues for legal migration or visitors. Spain has been so outspoken about Israel in recent years defending those borders, but understandably reacts to dangerous attempts to breach its own. And I'm grateful to share that this episode is sponsored by Emunah Israel, and its Guardian Angels sponsor a child program. For more than 90 years, Emunah, which is the Hebrew word for faith or faithfulness, has cared for Israel's most vulnerable children. Many have endured trauma, neglect, abandonment, or the loss of a parent. And at Emunah's 5 residential children's homes, they receive something every child deserves, a safe and loving place to heal, grow, and begin building a future. Through the Guardian Angels program, individuals, families, and church groups can sponsor a child for just $40 a month. That support helps provide therapy, clothing, educational materials, birthday gifts, and other practical needs that bring joy, stability, and healing. Sponsors are personally matched with a child and receive a photo, a short biography, birthday information, and facilitated email correspondence twice each year. Our family personally sponsors a 12-year-old girl named Ronit, who lives in an Emunah home near Tel Aviv with her sister. Proverbs 19, verse 17 tells us, "Whoever is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will reward them for what they have done." And Deuteronomy 10:18 says, "He," and that's speaking of the Lord, "defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow and loves the foreigner residing among you, giving them food and clothing." Sponsoring a child through Emunah is a tangible way to bless the orphans, bless Israel, to show kindness to a child today. Visit emunahisrael.org, that's EMUNAH Israel.org, or click the link in this episode's description below. In other news, Israel's incredible technology continues to bless the world. The Jerusalem Post reports that surgeons at Clalit Bellinson Hospital successfully removed a patient's sternum and part of her ribs before reconstructing her chest with a custom 3D printed implant on Tuesday, marking the first time an entire 3D printed chest cage has been implanted to reconstruct the chest wall in Israel. The patient, a woman in her 20s identified as Hadass, underwent the surgery after doctors discovered a tumor eroding her septum. While it initially appeared to be a benign cartilage tumor, extensive testing and examination revealed it to be an exceptionally rare type of sarcoma, a BRAF-altered mesenchymal tumor, which has only been reported in about 20 cases worldwide, according to medical literature. To remove the tumor, surgeons had to remove not just Hadass's sternum, but portions of the ribs attached to it as well. Head of thoracic surgery at Clalit Bellinson Hospital, Dr. Yuri Pesachovich, explained the surgical challenge of replacing what is essentially the anchor of the entire chest. If reconstruction is not precise, both respiratory mechanics and protection of the heart and lungs can be compromised. Every breath, cough, or physical movement places significant stress on this area, making it one of the most complex reconstructions in thoracic surgery, Pesachovich said. To make the replacement sternum as precise as possible, the surgical team rejected traditional reconstruction materials such as synthetic mesh, titanium plates, or bone cement, instead electing to use a fully customized 3D printed chest implant designed specifically for the patient's anatomy. The implant was made of PEC, polyether ketone, a high-performance carbon fiber reinforced polymer which was chosen as it combines strength with flexibility in a way that closely resembles natural bone, according to the head of orthopedic oncology at Clalit Bellinson Hospital, Dr. Israel Weiss. Weiss explained that the flexibility is particularly important for reconstructing a part of the body that constantly moves while breathing. Additionally, the material also allows surrounding tissue to gradually integrate with the implant over time. The surgery took about 2 hours, during which the surgeons removed the diseased bone and replaced it with a custom-designed implant through a discrete incision beneath the breast designed to minimize visible scarring and improve the cosmetic outcome. Hadass has since been discharged and is recovering well at home. Rare cases require creative solutions The combination of advanced 3D printing technology and close collaboration between multiple surgical specialties allowed us to offer this patient a solution that simply wasn't available a few years ago, Pesachowicz said. What a remarkable thing that we now live in a day and age where 3D printing affords the opportunity for a cancerous tumor in the rib cage and the sternum to be replaced and restored. It is truly Israel once again being a light to the nations. Well, our guest today is Dr. Leon Meyer, the Executive Director of Christians for Israel International. And Leon was born in the Netherlands and first spent time in Israel as a student, later returning with his wife to Haifa just before the First Gulf War. He stayed there and experienced Israel under threat as Iraqi Scud missiles were fired at the country, and then went on to work as a scientist at the Technion, Israel Institute of Technology, earning his Israeli doctorate in agricultural engineering before serving in the European Parliament as an advisor on issues including the Middle East. Today, through Christians for Israel International, Leon helps lead a global movement calling Christians to understand God's purposes for Israel, comfort the Jewish people, and respond through prayer, giving, and raising their voices on behalf of the land and people of Israel. Dr. Leon Meyer, welcome to the Israel Matters Show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Leon, for listeners meeting you for the first time, take us back to those years in Israel. Scud missiles, Gulf War, how did that shape your understanding of Israel's vulnerability and its resilience?
Well, it was quite. We lived in Israel from 91 till 99. And just 2 weeks after we entered the country in 91, we found ourselves with gas masks on our head, locked in sealed rooms. We had one child at the time, 1 year old. He was put in a kind of tent, so afraid of a gas attack from Iraq being shot at Israel. Well, if your question how it changed my perspective is, I came to understand that this war at that time, but also the just recent one, Hezbollah, Hamas, Iran, isn't about getting a piece of land or getting resources like Russia, Ukraine. It's essential. It's not about getting something. It's about annihilating a people. And I found that also in coming back to the Netherlands, where I live now, that I noticed that a lot of people think that here we have a house and we see burglars, we see people entering the house with bad intentions. And we tell Israel all the time, they come to steal your jewelry, but just, give them some jewelry and they leave you alone. But Israel knows they didn't come to steal jewelry, they came to kill us. And so you don't negotiate. You can take half my life, or you can take my wife, or one of my children. You fight. There is no negotiating with people who have the intention to kill you, not to come and steal. And I think this is what I encounter in many discussions. People don't understand the threat Israel is facing. So that's what I learned hiding myself in a sealed room with rockets falling from the sky on Haifa at the time, and knowing it's extension. And we read in the Bible about it, but then experiencing it is something else.
Yeah, and living there does really help you to see with greater clarity and greater vision. And you had the privilege of not only living there, but studying and working at the Technion and becoming one of the few foreigners to earn their Israeli doctorate. That season must have been quite remarkable. What did it teach you about the people, innovations, and the daily realities of Israeli society that the Western world just simply doesn't understand?
Well, what I learned that I think that there are two aspects of Israeli innovation and working at a university in Israel. If you and I combine our intellect, we have what they call our collective intelligence. So we use it to solve problems. You with your way of thinking, me with my way of thinking. But you come to it. But then, you and I, we are kind of similar. We probably even share some genes. We come from the Western world. But now suppose you're in a country where there are people from all over the world with different traditions of problem solving, which is Israel. People come from all over the world. So the collective intelligence in Israel is far greater, more diverse than you and I, if we combine only our intelligence. So that's one thing. I worked with immigrants from Russia, immigrants from Ethiopia, immigrants from Yemen, all over the world, and we try to solve problems. Then another thing, which really you know it, you read it in books, but then when you come across it, it really struck me. They do share a thing, which is their religion. Their religion kept them for 2,000 years in exile, and their religion doesn't say accept the rules, live by the rules. This is it. Their religion is study, learn, debate, ask questions. Whenever I ask my Jewish friend a question, I never get an answer. I always get a reply with another question. So in their tradition is the debate and sharpening the mind, which I really enjoyed. But I think which is also, you just mentioned one of the latest developments in Israel. But I think it's an example of how people always are trying to test and to try to improve life itself. So it was a great time to work on my PhD at the time, and to work from people from all kind of backgrounds in Israel.
Yeah, it's fascinating. In Israel, to fail is not to fail; it's to learn. Is an interesting way of approaching it. There is a problem, or we're going to try something. If it doesn't work, we don't get embarrassed by it. We don't get, that's just the mentality that is there within the Israeli psyche, isn't it?
True, and also, I did my PhD in agriculture engineering. In many parts of the world, agriculture is partly ruled by traditions. This is the way we do it. In Israel, there are no traditions on food production. So we want to improve food production, and which is the best way to do it? I found myself as a scientist sometimes running after the Israeli farmers. What are you doing? And they told me, well, I don't know, but it works. So then, I had to find out why does it work.
Yeah.
So it's an innovative culture to live in and to work in, and I think that's also I did as part of my research in fish ponds. I did my field work in fish ponds. I stood with until my hips in the water and made samples. And at the end of the months, I presented my results to the fish farmers. And there were some things I couldn't explain why it was so. And they explained it for me. They said, the wind is coming from the west. It means that on the bottom, this will happen. So this is why where your findings are so and so. So the practical knowledge of the people was a great help to me. And also, it's a joy to make you smarter together with other people.
So agricultural engineering at the Technion to heading up and leading and being the executive director of Christians for Israel International. How did that happen?
Well, I'm still plowing the fields. Well, I through my career, I started as with my PhD on agriculture and fisheries. I started working in European Parliament, then slowly on got into politics. I was a deputy mayor in the Netherlands for about 10 years. And a few years ago, I decided that I wanted to turn to complete the circle and really focus on Israel and what's going on. So that's why I decided to take on this job and help people understand in the world what Israel is about and what Israel also means for their Christian faith. So I did moved away a bit from my agriculture roots. I still have a garden, so I do some hobby on that. But I think it's also a calling of using your skills and helping other people to see God's love and God's faithfulness, God's love for his people and faithfulness, which also affects our faith.
Yeah, well, Christians for Israel is a global organization. There's branches all over the world, and their mission is to bring biblical understanding in the church and among the nations concerning God's purposes for Israel. Are there biblical truths about Israel that you believe many Christians have forgotten around the world? And if so, what are they?
There is, I will quote it to you because otherwise there is a beautiful verse in Jeremiah, chapter 32, verse 41. I think it's the only verse in the Bible where God says what is touching his heart and soul. God talks about his heart, God talks about his soul, but here he combines it. And the verse says, I will rejoice in doing them good, and will assuredly plant them in this land with all my heart and soul. Jeremiah 32, it's talking about after the exile that God is bringing them back. So if we believe in God and we want to be close to his heart and soul, he's telling us that his heart and soul is bringing his people back in their land where he planted them with his heart and soul. So I think sometimes we are missing. I just came back from the Philippines where we have a branch, and there I spoke with Christians, and I said, for me, most important is the Jesus who died on the cross and who was resurrected. That's the most important. That's the central of my belief. And then I told him, I said, and I don't care if he was born in Manila or Amsterdam or London, but he's born in Bethlehem. He was circumcised. He was brought to the temple. He celebrated Pesach. Wait a minute. Why is it so important for God that he did all those Jewish things? So for God, it was important that he was born in Bethlehem. So there is a plan. There is a plan which God shows us through the Bible, and we have to be careful not to, to pick and choose from the Bible and say, you could have been born in Manila. I don't care. Well, God cared. So if God cared, what is it telling me? And God shows me something of his character and of his plan for this world. So that's what we are trying to help Christians understand. There is a plan in God's word. And yes, you are involved. And yes, Jesus died for your sins. Jesus died to bring you back in relationship with God. But be aware, he didn't wrote off the Jewish people. They are still his heart and soul.
So let's talk about that faithfulness that God has towards Israel. Why is that so central to the Christian faith, or why should it be central to the Christian faith is perhaps a better question.
Yeah, I think what is essential in our faith is that we can trust a God who does not leave us. But why should I trust him? And do we see some results of his faithfulness? Yes, we do. Is there an example that he will not leave us if we give our life to him? Yes, there is an example. And the example is the Jewish people. He chose a people which didn't let go. And yes, they went through horrible times, but still they are in his hands. I don't know how you can explain that when there are so many rockets from Iran, that there is so minimum damage. Yes, of course, technology, but I can't explain it away with only technology. There is a God in heaven taking care of his people. If he takes care of his people, and I can be grafted in as an olive branch in that old tree, I know that I'm serving a God who is also trustworthy and who's also faithful to me. So I might stumble, I make mistakes, I can be angry and do stupid things, but in the end of the day, I can come back, and I know that the one who started in my life will fulfill it and will end it like he's doing with his people Israel. So I think we're trying to find evidence that he is to be trusted. Well, the evidence is the Jewish people.
And one of those aspects of that is Christian for Israel speaks about quite often, but a large part, again, of the church has no idea about it, is this concept of Aliyah, and I often hear those that have an understanding of Israel use the word Aliyah, but they don't necessarily quantify or explain it. Aliyah simply means the return of Jewish people from the nations to the land of Israel. That's not me, and actually the numbers are increasing even in the midst of war. Why do you see that aspect as not only a humanitarian issue, but also as the fulfillment of biblical prophecy? Why is it important for Christians for Israel to speak about Aliyah?
Well, there are the prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, they all talk about the people of Israel returning to the land of Israel. And it's not only after Babylonian captivity, it's in our days, because they come from the land of the north, the south, the east, the west, from all corners of the earth. So God spoke through his prophets that he was going to bring them back. And it's a sign of the times. Jesus says, if you look to the olive trees and the fig tree, if you look to the fig tree and the other trees, well, the other trees might be the church, might be the Christians, but the fig tree is a sign of Israel. And you see the leaves on the tree, you know the time is near. What are the leaves on the tree? What is happening to Israel? The prophets said that he will bring them back to the land. Well, there is a land since 1948, and they are being brought back from all corners of the earth. So the Bible says that we will talk about greater miracles than the return out of Egypt. And I sometimes think the church isn't grasping what's happening all around us. If people are going back to Israel from India, the Bnei Manasseh, or from Ukraine, or from France, all over the world, they are returning. An Asian people is returning to its ancient land. It should be a sign to us that something is happening. And that, well, let's say God is on the move. And we are not just only bystanders. We can be involved. We can be part of the fulfillment of the prophecy just by helping out.
Let's go there. What does meaningful Christian involvement look like in this moment in history?
We, as Christians for Israel, we have someone working in the Ukraine who is, together with the Jewish agency, just picking people up with vans and bringing them across the border to Moldova to fly to Israel. The Bnei Manasseh, the Jews from India, are returning, but all these kind of things cost money. Christians for Israel supported the flight from the Bnei Manasseh back to Israel. The same what they did with Ethiopian Jewry. In other countries where, like in France, it's sometimes very difficult for people to leave because of financial stress or mortgages of the houses they have. So Christians can help to ease that step in which are people taking. You know, we do not want to chase Jews back to Israel, but wherever is the opportunity and people choose to move back to and have a sense that they have to go back to their own ancient land, we can be of aid, we can help. And now there's another thing, you know, if you come from the Ukraine or you come from India and then you end in Israel in a very, very complex society with a lot of challenges, you have to learn the language, you have to learn maybe a new trade, you have to find a house. So we also support programs in the country, which is called First Home in the Homelands, which gives you a year of language study, helping you to find a job or training. So you are able to integrate into society as a full member of society.
So where can listeners find out more about Christians for Israel? Where is a touch point that they can go and see the kind of work that C4I is doing globally?
You can visit our website, c4israel.org.
C4Israel.org, and the 4 is the number 4. It's not spelt out. So I want to turn our listeners' attention to Europe and understanding the European politics and public policy and what's going on. And from your position in the center of Europe, in the Netherlands, in Nijkerk, how do you assess where Europe is at or posturing itself towards Israel at the moment? especially amid rising anti-Semitism and anti-Israel activism, and of course diplomatic pressure that's coming from the Netherlands and the heart of Europe as a whole?
Well, it's quite disturbing that it seems that we haven't learned anything from the Second World War or the time before the Second World War. So in my country, they made a law which I think the 22nd of September, it is illegal to buy or sell anything produced by settlements in Judea, Samaria, the West Bank, and the Golan Heights. And my government is trying to convince the German government to do the same. Well, the German Christian for Israel asked me, "What is your government doing? Are they trying to convince the Germans to start boycotting Jews? We know what's happening if you're going on that road." So it's really disturbing that a Western government is fueling anti-Jewish sentiment, which they are. And Christians for Israel in the Netherlands have a shop. You can buy wine, olive oil from Israel, and they just bought a whole stock for a year to sell wines from the West Bank, from Judea and Samaria. Well, they made good advertisements that they said that they will be punished and you can go through jail for 6 years. So the whole stock has been sold within a month's time. So people are buying and stockpiling now wine from these areas. Well, but it is disturbing. It is disturbing as if we haven't learned from history that boycotting Jews is a very dangerous thing to do. And you can disagree with policies from a government, but I haven't heard my government in the Holland asking for a boycott of the Chinese because of Tibet, or a boycott of Morocco because of the Western Sahara, or a boycott of Turkey because they are occupying Northern Cyprus. So why are you singling out Israel? It's double standards, and we know what double standards are. It's anti-Semitism. So it's disturbing. It's disturbing that especially Western Europe, not so much Eastern Europe, but Western European countries are taking these kind of steps.
Well, and this has touched close to home, hasn't it? Because the international headquarters of C4I was a target not that long ago. Can you share a little bit about what happened there? It was public news across the Netherlands, and it reached across the world. But I think there is it just helps to show the battle that is currently raging. And so tell us a little bit. You had a bomb in your headquarters. Tell us what happened.
I'll give you a little bit of background. Since the 7th of October and since our stand for Israel, we have been under intimidation, threats all the time. Our public meetings are being met with demonstrators yelling that we are Christians for genocide and these kind of things. They vandalized, they spray painted our building 3 or 4 times. So after a while, the police told us we can't guarantee your safety or the safety of your visitors. You have to build a fence around your building. So we finally agreed. We built a fence, 3-meter high, electric fence around the building. So you can't enter the building, but not so freely anymore. And then I think it was in a 2-week period, there was a bomb attack at a synagogue in Rotterdam. There was a bomb attack at the Jewish school in Amsterdam. And then we were attacked. But because of the fence was just erected and just in place, they couldn't get close to the building. So the bomb didn't do so much damage. But then the police told us that if the bomb had gone off at the entrance of a building, all the windows would have been broken and we would have had a fire broken out. So the police said we take it very seriously. This is a bomb attack. And we learned that the FBI found, and the bomb attack was claimed by a Iranian organization active in Iraq. Well, the FBI found someone in Iraq, arrested him, and he is extradited he's brought to the US, and he was the one who's giving the commands for those bomb attacks. Now the police in the Netherlands are still searching for a guy with a hoodie and a fat bike who placed the bomb. But So yes, it means that if you are standing up for Israel, you can become a target also. At a conference, just recently at a conference, which is also, people sometimes think it's our Muslims or radical Muslims. Just recently at a conference here in Holland, in the summer conference, we had a banner of Christians for Israel, for people, if they want more information from us, they could go to the QR code. One of the participants of the conference vandalized the banner, and she's now all over podcast, being heralded as a hero that she attacked us. And so the media, and she claims to be a journalist. Well, I think it's a very strange kind of journalist who's going around attacking others and vandalizing material from other people. But people are not saying you shouldn't have done this. People are saying, wow, how wonderful that you did this. So we are getting into an atmosphere in which not only Jews are being, have to, take their safety into account. Also, if you support Israel, you have to be on the safe side. Be careful.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've touched, obviously, the link to Iran there and current events that involve Iran, its proxies in the wider Middle East. They continue to affect Israel's security, but what you're saying is they're also affecting Christian security, and that's an increasing measure. You know, if you don't stand up for them in difficult times, you reap what you sow as a society. I mean, we're seeing that, and that's why that Hananiah Naphtali satirical thing is so relevant.
Yeah.
In light of all of this that's going on, how should Christians pray, think biblically, and respond to these threats without falling into fear or sensationalism?
Well, I think we also have to learn from history, because we all know it won't end with the Saturday people. And the next step is the Sunday people. So if we stay quiet now and things get worse, we might regret that we have stayed quiet. So speak out. Be wise in what you do, but do speak out in your churches, in your home groups, among your family, in your friends, wisely. But Israel is a nation to be defended, and you are, attacking Jews, promoting anti-Semitism is not the values we want to promote. And certainly not if you're a Christian and your faith is being based on a Jewish book. So that's one. Speak out, be informed, find good material, like yourself, spreading good material, look for good websites, and pray. God is a God who's listening to prayers. He is Almighty. He is El Shaddai. So we put our faith in Him. And there's one great commandment which says, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And in Jerusalem, I think the whole of Israel is being meant also. So we pray for the peace of Jerusalem and for Israel, and we can pray for strength and courage for ourselves.
Dr. Aliyah Meyer, thank you for joining us on the Israel Matters show. Your life and your work remind us that standing with Israel is not only a matter of politics or current events, but also the reality of that Scripture is important, covenant is important, faithfulness is important, and practical love for the Jewish people is vital. For our listeners, you can learn more about Dr. Meyer and the global work of Christians for Israel International at C4Israel.org, where you will find teaching, news, prayer resources, and practical ways to bless Israel and the Jewish people. And you can see the chapters in your own respective nations as well. We touched during that time with Leon about Aliyah, and each week here on the Israel Matters show, we like to end our time together with a deep dive into a key biblical Hebrew word. Inspired by the work that C4I does in assisting Jewish people who want to return to their ancestral biblical homeland, the Hebrew word we're exploring today is one of the most beautiful and hope-filled words in the Hebrew language. It's the word Aliyah. It comes from the Hebrew verb alah, meaning to go up, to ascend, to rise, or to climb. And in modern Hebrew, Aliyah most commonly refers to the return of Jewish people to the land of Israel. But the biblical meaning of this word is much richer than immigration alone. Throughout the scriptures, Allah becomes a picture of drawing nearer to God, ascending to his presence, walking in obedience and responding to his call. It is a word that reminds us that the life of faith is always an upward journey. And one of the fascinating things about the Hebrew language is that direction is often theological. In English, we travel north, south, east, or west. But in the Bible, people almost always go up to Jerusalem, regardless of the direction from which they're traveling. Whether someone was coming from Galilee in the north, Jericho in the east, or the Negev in the south, they were said to be going up to Jerusalem. Certainly, Jerusalem sits high in the Judean hills, but the language also carries a deeper spiritual truth. Jerusalem was the place where God chose to place his name. The place he marked for himself. To go to Jerusalem was not simply to change locations, it was to ascend towards the place of God's presence. And we first encounter this idea early in the life of Abraham. In Genesis 13 verse 1 we read, "Then Abram went up from Egypt, he and his wife and all that he had." The Hebrew says Abram made Aliyah. He went up from Egypt into the land God had promised him. That movement is more than geographical. Throughout Scripture, Egypt often becomes a picture of bondage, while the Promised Land represents God's covenant blessings. Abraham's journey upward reminds us that walking with God often means leaving behind what is familiar in order to embrace what God has promised. And this pattern repeats itself throughout the Bible. When the children of Israel were delivered from slavery, they did not merely escape Egypt, they went up from Egypt. Their physical journey became a picture of every believer's spiritual journey. God calls his people out of bondage and leads them upward into freedom, covenant, and relationship with himself. Perhaps nowhere is this more beautifully expressed than in the Psalms of Ascent. Psalms 120 through 134 were traditionally sung by Jewish pilgrims as they traveled up to Jerusalem for the great biblical festivals. Every step towards the city became an act of worship. Every climb up the mountain reminded them that drawing near to God is worth every effort. And in Psalm 122 verse 1, which Leon mentioned earlier, verse 6, I'm praying for the peace of Jerusalem, but Psalm 122 verse 1, David declares, "I was glad when they said to me, 'Let us go into the house of the Lord.'" This was not simply excitement about visiting a city, it was joy at ascending into God's presence. And the Hebrew verb Allah appears hundreds of times throughout the Old Testament. It describes people going up mountains, ascending to worship, offering sacrifices upon the altar, and even smoke ascending towards heaven. Again and again, the movement is upward. The Bible reminds us that worship lifts our eyes above our circumstances. Prayer ascends before God like incense. Faith continually calls us upward from fear forward towards trust. The idea of Aliyah is also deeply connected to God's covenant with Israel. Throughout the Torah, the Psalms, and the prophets, the Lord repeatedly promises that after his people have been scattered among the nations, he will gather them and bring them back to the land he gave to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Many Jewish and Christian readers therefore understand the modern return of Jewish people to Israel as at least a developing fulfillment of these ancient promises. One of the earliest and clearest promises appears in Deuteronomy 30, verse 3 through 5, where Moses tells Israel that even after dispersion among the nations, the Lord will gather them again, bring them into their land their fathers possessed, and cause them to prosper there. This is significant, because the promise was given before Israel had even entered the land. Scattering would not be the final chapter. God's covenant faithfulness would ultimately lead to restoration and return. And Isaiah develops this promise further. In Isaiah 11, verse 11 and 12, the prophet declares that the Lord will reach out his hand a second time to recover the remnant of his people and gather the dispersed of Israel from the four corners of the earth. Many who see modern Aliyah as prophetic fulfillment emphasize the worldwide scope of this language. It's not merely a return from one neighboring empire, but a gathering from many regions and nations. Isaiah 43, 5 and 6 gives the same promise in every direction. I will bring your descendants from the east and gather you from the west, and I will say to the north, give them up, and to the south, do not keep them back. It's a global return. The prophetic picture is of God summoning his sons and daughters from every point of the compass. In the modern era, Jewish communities have returned to Israel from Europe, North Africa, the Middle East, Asia, Ethiopia, the former Soviet Union, and the Americas. And those who interpret Aliyah prophetically see this international return as strikingly consistent with Isaiah's language of a people gathered from east, west, north, and south. Jeremiah also describes the return in language so dramatic that it would be remembered as a kind of second Exodus. In Jeremiah 16, verse 14 through 15, the prophet says that a day would come when people would speak not only of the God who brought Israel out of Egypt, but of the God who brought the children of Israel back from the land of the north and from all the lands where he had driven them. The exodus from Egypt was one great act of deliverance, but Jeremiah foresaw another gathering so remarkable that it would become a defining testimony to God's power and faithfulness. Jeremiah 31 adds a deeply personal dimension. Because God promises to bring his people from the north country and gather them from the ends of the earth, but the passage specifically mentions the blind, the lame, the expectant mothers and women in labor. In other words, God does not gather only the strong, wealthy, or influential. That women in labor one is even more remarkable and specific when you consider that the Ethiopian Jews returning on a plane, one of the ladies actually gave birth mid-air, literally as she was traveling back to the land of Israel. He brings home the vulnerable, the elderly, families, children, those who need assistance along the journey. It's a picture of Aliyah not merely as a national movement, but as the tender work of a shepherd bringing his scattered flock home. Ezekiel 36 connects the gathering of the people with the restoration of the land, and God speaks to the mountains of Israel, promising that they will again produce branches and fruit because his people are about to return. Ruined cities will be rebuilt, empty fields will be again cultivated, and land once considered desolate will become fruitful. The nations will recognize that the Lord has rebuilt the ruined places and replanted that which was desolate. And those who view modern Israel through this prophetic lens point not only to the return of Jewish people, but also to the rebuilding of towns, cultivation of the soil, restoration of agriculture, and renewed life in places that had long suffered neglect. And yet, Ezekiel makes clear that the physical restoration is not the end of the story. In Ezekiel 36, verse 24 to 26, God says, I will take you from among the nations, gather you out of all countries, and bring you into your own land. And then he promises cleansing, a new heart and a new spirit. The order is meaningful to many interpreters. Gathering to the land is followed by spiritual renewal. Aliyah is therefore understood not merely as a demographic or political movement, but as one stage within a larger work of redemption that God has promised to accomplish in his people. Ezekiel 37 presents perhaps the most dramatic prophetic picture. The prophet sees a valley filled with dry bones. The bones come together, receive flesh, stand upon their feet, and finally receive breath. God identifies the bones as the whole house of Israel and promises, I will bring you into the land of Israel. Many Christians who understand modern Aliyah prophetically see the dry bones as a picture of a people who appeared nationally lifeless, yet were preserved, gathered, and restored. The physical restoration of the bones precedes the breath entering them, again suggesting to these interpreters a national restoration followed by a deeper spiritual awakening. We have a reenactment of that Valley of Dry Bones and the bones coming together in the sinews in Cyrus Nations UK, the Hatikva Films production that looks at Britain's role. And Spurgeon gave a tremendous message in 1864 talking about the Valley of Dry Bones, and we reenact that. If you haven't seen it, I'd encourage you to click on the link below and watch Cyrus Nations UK. Another scripture where it talks about this is Amos 9, verse 14 to 15, where it describes the return, the rebuilding, and permanence. Israel will rebuild ruined cities, inhabit them, plant vineyards, make gardens, and enjoy their fruit. God concludes by saying that he will plant them in their land. For those who see modern Aliyah as prophetic, the imagery is especially powerful. A returned people rebuilding communities, cultivating vineyards, planting gardens, and establishing roots again in their ancestral homeland. Zechariah 8, verse 7 through 8 declares, I will save my people from the land of the east, and from the land of the west I will bring them back, and they shall dwell in the midst of Jerusalem. The promise is both geographical and relational. They shall be my people, and I will be their God. The return to Jerusalem is therefore presented not as an end in itself, but as part of the restoration of covenant relationship. The prophets also describe the nations playing a role in their return. Isaiah 49:22 pictures the nations carrying Israel's sons in their arms and daughters upon their shoulders. It was what Leon was talking about. Isaiah 60 speaks of ships bringing Israel's sons from afar, along with resources used in the restoration of the land. And many believers consequently understand helping Jewish people make Aliyah through transportation, practical assistance, prayer, or financial support as participating in a prophetic role assigned to the nations. Another repeated theme is that God performs this gathering for the honor of his own name. Ezekiel 36 explains that Israel's restoration is not based upon human merit. God acts so that the nations will know that he is the Lord. Ezekiel 39:27 through 28 likewise says that when he gathers his people from the lands of their enemies, he will display his holiness before the nations. Aliyah, therefore, becomes a testimony, not primarily to human achievement, but to the faithfulness of the God who keeps covenant even when his people have failed. This is why many believers regard the modern return of the Jewish people as more than an unusual moment or movement of history. They see a people dispersed for centuries, returning from many nations as an ancient language revived in daily life, cities rebuilt, soil cultivated, and Jerusalem once again filled with Jewish life. They understand these developments as echoes of promises spoken by Moses and the prophets thousands of years ago. All these passages testify to one central truth: God has not forgotten his covenant promises. The judge of all the earth remains faithful to his word. And for many Jewish people today, making Aliyah, returning to Israel, is therefore understood as participating in this ancient story of promise and restoration. Every family arriving from another nation, every child learning Hebrew, every community being rebuilt, and every field being planted can be seen as another step in a journey that the prophets envisioned long ago. This carries, friends, profound significance. God's faithfulness to Israel reminds us that he never forgets his promises. The same God who gathers his covenant people is the God who keeps every promise he made through Jesus, the Messiah. His covenant faithfulness has not changed. What he begins, he finishes. What he promises, he fulfills. And throughout the prophets, the Lord repeatedly promises that he will gather his scattered people from the nations and bring them back to the land that he gave to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This promise is one of the great themes of biblical prophecy. The return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel is not merely a political event. It reflects God's enduring faithfulness to his covenant. This carries profound significance. God's faithfulness to Israel reminds us that he never forgets his promises. The same God who gathers his covenant people is the God who keeps every promise he has made through Jesus the Messiah. His covenant faithfulness has not changed. What he begins, he finishes. What he promises, he fulfills. But Aliyah also speaks to every follower of the Messiah in a deeply personal way. The New Testament continues this upward imagery. The Apostle Paul urges believers in Colossians 3 verse 1 and 2, "If then you were raised with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ is. Set your mind on things above, not on things on the earth." The Christian life is an ongoing Aliyah. It's a daily turning of our hearts upward towards the things of God. It's choosing heaven's perspective over earthly distractions. It's continually lifting our eyes towards Christ. Jesus himself embodied this upward journey. Throughout his earthly ministry, he repeatedly went up the mountains to pray. He went up to Jerusalem fully knowing that the cross awaited him there. His final earthly journey was literally an ascent towards the place where redemption would be accomplished. And then, after his resurrection, he ascended, he aliyah'd into heaven. His ascension reminds us that our Savior reigns at the Father's right hand and that our true citizenship is ultimately in his kingdom. And there's another beautiful lesson hidden in the word Aliyah. Ascending requires movement. No one drifts uphill. It requires intentionality. Every pilgrim climbing towards Jerusalem had to take one step after another. The climb could be difficult. The road could be steep, yet every step brought them closer to the place where God had chosen to reveal his presence. The same is true of our spiritual lives. Growth rarely happens all at once. Holiness is not instantaneous. Maturity comes one faithful step at a time. Each act of obedience is another step upward. Each prayer is another ascent. Each decision to trust God instead of fear is another aliyah of the heart. And this is why the scriptures repeatedly call us to lift our eyes. In Psalm 121, verse 1 and 2, one of the songs of ascents, we read, "I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where comes my help? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth." The pilgrims climbing towards Jerusalem sang these words because they knew their journey depended not upon their own strength, but upon the God who watched over them. The climb was real, but so was the Lord's faithfulness. And perhaps today you find yourself at the bottom of a mountain. Perhaps you are carrying more than you can handle, the burdens that make the climb feel overwhelming. Maybe the road before you seems steep. Remember that God rarely asks us to leap to the summit. He simply asks us to keep taking the next faithful step. Every act of trust is an Aliyah. Every moment of obedience is an ascent. Every time we choose to draw near to God instead of retreating into fear, we're walking the upward path He has set before us. And one day, the upward journey will reach its glorious completion. The book of Revelation gives us a vision of the new Jerusalem where God's people will dwell with Him forever. Every earthly pilgrimage points towards that eternal destination. Every ascent towards God in this life prepares us for the day when we will stand in His presence, where there will be no more tears, no more sorrow, no more separation. So perhaps, friend, today, the prayer of our hearts is this: Lord, teach me to live a life of Aliyah. Help me to leave behind whatever keeps me in spiritual Egypt and give me the courage to follow wherever you lead. Lift my eyes above my circumstances and fix them upon you. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments on today's show. Take a moment to like, subscribe, and share. It does help us get the message of Israel Matters out further and wider. Let's stand together and use our voice and influence to combat anti-Semitism and to point people to the Lord and to His word. And please remember to visit emunahisrael.org to learn more about the opportunities to sponsor a needy child in Israel through their Guardian Angels program. You can find the link in the description below. Israel Matters is a listener-supported show, so please continue supporting the ministry through the links in the description below to help make it possible for us to continue to make timely biblical content like this. Thank you for joining today. I'm Stephen Briggs, and this is Israel Matters.